They say you should follow your dreams, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes, it'll cost you everything. Your bed, your dinner table, your so-called safety net. See, people love an underdog story, but they skip the part where the dog sleeps in a car and eats gas station burritos to survive. They cheer at the finish line but never show up for the first lap, where the road is cracked, the tires are bald, and nobody believes in you except the voice in your head saying, "Don't stop." Thanks for watching and don't forget to like. My name is Max, and all I ever wanted was to drive fast. Not just fast. Faster. As a kid, I memorized the sound of V10 engines before I learned algebra. While other kids were playing video games, I was stealing Wi-Fi to stream Formula 1. I didn't care about grades, or college, or whatever corporate hamster wheel my parents had greased up for me. I cared about racing. I lived for it. And that was the problem. My parents? They weren't fans of living fast. My dad worked in finance, the kind of guy who believes dreams are for people who can afford failure. My mom? She kept a tight ship. Honor roll, violin lessons, SAT tutors starting in 7th grade. We weren't rich, but we were structured. God, were we structured. And there I was, obsessed with going sideways around corners at 150 miles per hour. At first, they humored me. Little plastic cars, a video game here and there. But by 15, I was spending every spare moment hanging out at a rundown karting track on the edge of town. I begged for a second-hand cart. Worked part-time at a car wash to chip in. My dad said, "This is just a phase, Max. You'll grow out of it." Spoiler alert, I didn't. By 17, I had my first real cart. Not new, not fancy, but mine. I started racing in local leagues. And winning. But none of that mattered at home. If anything, it made things worse. Every race was a lie. Every trophy, a secret. I hid my gear in the trunk of my friend Leo's car. I faked study group sessions that were actually practice laps. Double life? Try triple. Student by day, cashier by night, racer in the stolen hours between. Then came the day everything spun out. It was the regional finals. Biggest kart race of the year. Winner gets a test run with a junior formula team. I was in. I could feel it. Only problem? It was the same day as my AP physics exam. My dad's golden ticket to my so-called future. I made the choice I'd always known I'd make. I skipped the exam. Won the race. Came home with a trophy in one hand and adrenaline still buzzing through my veins. My dad was waiting. Holding my unopened test slip. "You didn't even show up," he said. "Nope," I said. "But I won." He didn't yell. That would have been easier. He just looked at me like I was a stranger. Told me I had until the end of the week to get out. "Since you're a big man now, chasing dreams and all." And just like that, I was out. No money. No plan. Just a karting trophy, a duffel bag, and a head full of engine noise. Where do you go when home isn't an option? You go anywhere. You drive. You crash on couches. You work crap jobs and eat expired ramen. You learn the hard way that passion doesn't pay rent. And you end up, 3 months later, sitting alone in a dive bar with a busted phone and a bruised ego, wondering if maybe your dad was right all along. That's where I was. When he walked in. Gray hair, black blazer, Rolex that could pay my rent for a year. He looked around, sat 2 stools down, and ordered a whiskey, neat. Then he glanced at me, smirked, and said, "You drive like someone who doesn't care if they live or die." I blinked. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," he said, raising his glass. "But I might just be your ticket out of this dump." And that's how it started. A nobody. A bar. A billionaire. And a second chance I didn't see coming. The billionaire's name was Vincent Strom. Think Gordon Ramsay meets Formula One with a splash of Bond villain, if Bond villains wore cashmere scarves and ran racing teams on the brink of bankruptcy. "You want a shot?" he said, sliding a napkin across the bar like it was $1 million contract. "Show up here tomorrow at 8 a.m. sharp." The address was an industrial lot outside the city. I had nowhere else to be. What was I gonna do, say no? The next morning, I showed up. The place looked like someone had forgotten it existed. Faded signs, rusty gates, the scent of oil and lost dreams in the air. Inside the main garage sat 6 open-wheel cars in various stages of disrepair. This was no elite F3 facility, it was the graveyard where hopefuls went to rot. Vincent stood next to a beat-up car and handed me a fire suit. "No time for orientation. You get 15 laps. Impress me." The track out back was narrow, cracked, and brutal. The kind of circuit that chewed up overconfident rookies and spat out their egos. But once I sat in that car, everything clicked. The engine fired up, and the rest of the world faded. 15 laps. I treated it like war. When I rolled back into the garage, the pit crew, 2 tired-looking guys in oil-stained jumpsuits, were blinking at the lap timer. One of them let out a whistle. Vincent nodded. "Just once. You're raw. But you've got the thing." "What thing?" "The crazy. The bite. The fearlessness that says, screw physics, I'm making this corner mine." And that's how I joined Strom GP. But this wasn't some movie montage where talent alone carried me to the podium. This was blood, blisters, and being broke. I cleaned tires, tuned engines, fetched coffee. My contract was basically, you get a cot in the back room and enough food to keep you conscious. I slept next to spare parts and smelled like brake fluid. But I was in. Vincent didn't just hand me a race seat. He made me earn it, by going toe-to-toe with the team's other prospect, Dante. Tall, tatted, fast, and mean as hell. The guy looked like he was carved out of a tire wall. He didn't talk much, just glared like I'd stolen his shot by breathing the same air. "Only one of you gets the car for the season," Vincent said. "The other gets the boot." It was on. Dante and I pushed each other to the edge, on the track and off. We watched each other's test runs like hawks. Every 1/10 of a second counted. Every spin was a nail in the coffin. Meanwhile, Vincent ran the team like a drill sergeant with a hangover. I was up at 5, doing strength training, running strategy drills, cleaning gear. And when I wasn't training, I was learning the car, every bolt, every sensor. Vincent said if you can't fix it, you don't deserve to drive it. It was brutal. And I loved every second of it. After 3 weeks of hell, Vincent called us into the garage. No ceremony. Just 2 printouts of lap times. He pointed at mine. "You're faster. You get the seat." Dante stormed out, didn't say a word. I almost felt bad. Almost. Vincent clapped my shoulder. "Congrats. Now the real work begins." And just like that, I was in my first real race car. They say your first race is like your first kiss, awkward, nerve-wracking, and over too fast. Mine was more like getting thrown into a pit of lions and told to drive your way out. I stalled on the start. Got clipped in turn 3. But somehow, clawed my way back to 5th out of 18. Vincent wasn't impressed. "You want a cookie for finishing a race? This is F4, not kindergarten." That night, I stared at the ceiling above my cot and wondered if I'd made a huge mistake. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was just getting started. By the 3rd race of the season, I was getting podiums. By the 6th, I was leading the championship. Vincent never said, "Good job." His version of praise was, "Try not to die next time." But he kept me in the seat. And that said enough. Word started spreading. A rookie tearing up F4 with no sponsors, no pedigree, and a busted helmet? People were curious. Scouts showed up. Journalists sniffed around. One guy asked if I was the American Verstappen, and I told him if I had Verstappen's budget, I wouldn't be duct taping my boots. That line made it into the press. So did my lap times. Offers started trickling in. Not big ones, yet. But a Formula 3 team invited me for a test run. And that was the day I drove a real car. Like, real. Carbon fiber. Wind tunnel tuned. A beast that could kill you if you blinked wrong. I didn't blink. I flew. After that, things moved fast. One of Strom's rivals, Vector Racing, offered me a junior development deal. It wasn't money, not yet. But it was track time, simulators, and a shot at a seat next year. Vincent gave me his blessing with a grunt and a handshake. Before I left, he said, "You've got tenacity. Just don't let these snakes in suits tame it out of you." And just like that, I was gone. New team. New circuits. New pressure. And one day, between practice sessions, I saw her. My mom. In the stands. Alone. No sign, no waving. Just watching. When I went to find her after the race, she was gone. That hit harder than the chicane at Monza. But I buried it. I buried everything. I was here to win. By the end of the F3 season, I had 3 wins, 5 podiums, and more media than I knew what to do with. One article called me the Rebel Rookie. Another said I was the most exciting driver since Lewis Hamilton. And then came the call. "Max," my agent said. "You've been invited to the Monaco Grand Prix. Not as a guest. As a reserve driver. For Apex." I dropped my phone. Apex was the big leagues. Formula 1. Real F1. The same team that once had champions. The same team my dad used to make me watch with him before everything went sideways. I was going. But this wasn't the finish line. This was just the beginning of a whole new race. Monaco wasn't just another race. It was the race. The one with billionaires on yachts, champagne-soaked grid girls, and more cameras than pit crews. It was where dreams launched, and reputations exploded on tight corners. And I was there. In Apex Racing's garage. Wearing their suit. Sitting in their simulator, learning a car worth more than everything I'd ever touched. They didn't let me race. Not yet. But I soaked in every second. I shadowed their drivers. I studied telemetry like scripture. I asked the engineers questions until they either respected me or wanted to run me over. And then, unexpectedly, my moment came. Their second driver got food poisoning the night before qualifying. Violent, bathroom exorcism level food poisoning. And I was next in line. "Max, you're up." Just like that. I was in a Formula 1 car. On the streets of Monaco. And holy hell, it was brutal. The walls were inches from my mirrors. The brakes felt like hitting a brick wall. The G-forces twisted my insides like a washing machine. But I made it through qualifying P14. Not spectacular, but I didn't crash. And that, in Monaco, is half the game. The race? Chaos. I avoided 2 pileups, danced through rain, and climbed up to 9th by the checkered flag. 2 points. It wasn't a podium. But it was a debut. I'd arrived. The rest of the season was a whirlwind. I didn't have a full-time seat, but I raced when I could. I trained like a maniac. I took interviews, met sponsors, shook hands with billionaires who'd never survive one lap in my helmet. I lived in hotels, ate protein bars, and spent more time in flight lounges than in beds. And then, in Belgium, everything went sideways. I clipped a wet curb on Eau Rouge during practice. The car snapped. I hit the barrier hard. Bone rattling, airbag deflating, scream in your helmet hard. When I woke up, everything was blurry. My ribs screamed. My neck burned. But the worst pain wasn't physical. My dad was there. Sitting quietly in the corner of the hospital room, hands clasped like he was praying. We didn't talk at first. Just silence and the beeping of machines. Finally, he said, "You looked good out there." "Didn't finish," I muttered. "Still looked good." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. And maybe the only one I needed. I was out for 2 weeks. Missed one race, nearly lost my chance with Apex. But they held the seat for me. Said I'd earned it. When I got back behind the wheel, I was different. More cautious? No. Sharper. The crash had burned away my fear. Left only focus. Vincent texted me, "Welcome to the club. If you're not bleeding, you're not pushing." I was pushing. And the championship was closer than anyone thought. The final race of the season was in Abu Dhabi. Bright lights. Desert heat. A track that looked like a neon roller coaster. It all came down to this. I was tied for first in the championship with Luca Bellari, Italy's golden boy. Smooth, ruthless, and annoyingly handsome. He had sponsors lining up like groupies. I had a beat-up helmet and a chip on my shoulder. The whole world was watching. So was my dad. My mom. Vincent. Even Dante showed up in the paddock, arms crossed, silently nodding from a distance. That meant more than I'd admit. Qualifying was tight. I lined up second on the grid, right behind Luca. One more race. One more shot. Lights out. We launched like missiles. Luca and I traded places half a dozen times. DRS battles. Tire smoke. Dive bombs into turn 9. Every lap felt like my last. I lost the lead. Took it back. Lost it again. Then came the final lap. I was in second, half a second behind. Radio crackled. "You want this, Max? Now's the time." I didn't respond. I just drove. Turn 11. He braked early. I didn't. I dove down the inside, tires screaming. We touched wheels. Barely. Enough to make his car twitch. I got through. The last straight. He was in my mirrors. I could feel him breathing down my neck. But he never passed me. Checkered flag. I won. World champion. The roar in my helmet was deafening, and it wasn't the engine. It was everything. Every sleepless night. Every busted knuckle. Every frozen gas station burrito. I did it. On the podium, they handed me the trophy. It was heavier than I imagined. Cold. Real. The anthem played. I looked into the crowd and saw my parents, standing together. My mom had tears in her eyes. My dad clapped, once, slowly. That was all I needed. Vincent? He just gave me a thumbs up. After the ceremony, I sat alone in the back of the garage, champagne still drying on my suit. I thought about that night in the bar. The kid with no home, no plan, no clue. And I thought. He'd be proud. People always ask what it feels like to win. Here's my answer. It feels like proving the world wrong, and yourself right. At the same time. It feels like peace. The loud, engine-roaring kind. And I plan on staying here a while. The end.